At the Thanksgiving party, my grandmother slammed her hand on the mahogany table and yelled at me. Why is an elderly couple living in the $7.8 million vacation home I bought for you? The entire room went silent. The sound of silverware clinking stopped instantly. I froze, looking at the diamond rings on her fingers and then down at my own worn-out boots. I whispered, "What are you talking about, Grandma? I am homeless right now." At that moment, my sister turned pale, and my brother-in-law dropped his fork. Before I tell you how a lawyer walked in and changed my life forever, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been accused of something you did not do by the people who are supposed to protect you. My name is Sophia, and at 32 years old, I never thought my life would look like this. I am a forensic accountant by trade. I used to uncover corporate fraud for a living. But for the last 3 weeks, I have been sleeping in the back seat of my 10-year-old sedan, parking behind supermarkets to avoid police patrols. I came to my grandmother Beatrice's estate in Atlanta today, not to argue, but because I was starving. I just wanted a plate of turkey, and maybe a moment of warmth. Grandmother Beatrice has always been the matriarch of our family. She built a beauty empire from nothing and ruled our family with an iron fist. But lately her memory had been fading, or so my sister Kesha kept telling everyone. I stood up, my legs shaking from lack of food. "Grandma," I said, my voice trembling, "I do not own a vacation home. I do not even own an apartment. I was evicted last month because I spent my savings paying for Mom's surgery." Beatrice narrowed her eyes. Her gaze was sharp, not confused. "Do not lie to me, Sophia. I bought that property in Martha's Vineyard 3 years ago under your name as a trust. It was supposed to be a legacy for this family. But my private investigator tells me an old white couple has been living there for months. Are you renting it out? Are you pocketing the money while you dress in these rags to embarrass me?" Before I could answer, my younger sister Kesha jumped up from her seat. She was wearing a designer dress that cost more than my car. She rushed over to Grandma and grabbed her hand, using that fake sweet voice she always used to manipulate people. "Grandma, please calm down. You are confused again. Remember what we talked about. Sophia sold that house years ago. She has a gambling problem. She lost it all. That is why she looks like this." I stared at Kesha in horror. I have never gambled a day in my life. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but then Brad, Kesha's husband, chimed in. "Brad is a hedge fund manager, or at least that is what he tells people." He sat back in his chair, swirling his wine glass, looking at me with that familiar look of pity and disgust. "Sophia," Brad said, his voice smooth and condescending, "don't upset Beatrice on Thanksgiving. We all know you have made some poor life choices. Look, if you need money for a motel or a hot meal, I can help." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a $50 bill, tossing it onto the tablecloth like I was a beggar. "Here, take a taxi and go. Let the family enjoy dinner in peace." The insult felt like a slap in the face. A $50 bill to make me disappear. I looked around the table. My aunts and uncles were looking at their plates, too afraid to speak up against Brad and Kesha. They all believed the lie. They all thought I was the failure, the black sheep, while Kesha was the golden child who married a successful white businessman. I felt tears stinging my eyes. The smell of the roast turkey was making me dizzy. I wanted to scream that I was the one who managed the family audits for years. I wanted to scream that Kesha had never worked a day in her life. But hunger and exhaustion had taken my voice. "Fine," I whispered. "I will go." I turned to leave, ready to walk back out into the cold rain. But just as I reached the heavy oak doors, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, demanding sound that made everyone jump. The housekeeper opened the door and in walked Mr. Henderson. He was Grandma Beatrice's personal attorney, a man who never showed up on a holiday unless it was an emergency. He was holding a thick leather briefcase. Rain dripped from his trench coat onto the marble floor. "Mr. Henderson," Grandma said, looking surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I apologize for the intrusion," Beatrice the lawyer said, his face grim. "But we have a situation that cannot wait until Monday." He walked straight to the dining table, ignoring the food, and placed a stack of documents right in front of my grandmother. "We just received a notice from the utility company in Martha's Vineyard," Mr. Henderson announced. "The electricity bill for the property at 12 Ocean View Drive is over $5,000 this month. And since the property is still legally registered to the family trust, they are threatening to put a lien on your main assets." The room went dead silent again. Kesha dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against her china plate. Grandma Beatrice looked at the papers, then looked at Kesha, and finally looked at me. "Wait a minute," Grandma said slowly. "Kesha told me Sophia sold this house. How can there be an electric bill if the house was sold?" Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses and looked directly at me. "The house was never sold, madam. According to the county records, the deed is still firmly in the name of Sophia Vance. However, there is something very strange. The utility usage suggests a large family is living there full-time, yet Sophia is standing right here." I felt the blood drain from my face. I own a house. I own a multi-million-dollar estate. I looked at Brad. For the first time, his arrogant smile was gone. He looked terrified. He was staring at the lawyer, sweat forming on his forehead. Sophia Grandma yelled, her voice booming. "Explain this. If you still own the house, why are you sleeping in a car? And who is racking up $5,000 in electricity bills in my house?" I tried to speak. I tried to say I didn't know. I tried to say I had never signed any deed. But the room started to spin. The smell of the food, the shock of the news, and the adrenaline were too much for my starving body. My vision went black. The last thing I heard was Kesha screaming at Brad to do something, and the thud of my own body hitting the floor. The smell of ammonia stung my nose, sharp and burning. My eyes fluttered open to see the crystal chandelier above me spinning slightly. I was not in a hospital bed. I was still lying on the Persian rug in my grandmother's living room. The first face I saw was not a paramedic, but my sister Kesha. She was standing over me with her hands on her hips, shaking her head with a look of pure annoyance. "Oh, get up, Sophia," Kesha sneered, kicking my shoe lightly with her designer heel. "You are not winning an Oscar for this performance. We all know you are just trying to distract Grandma from the truth." I tried to sit up, my head throbbing. I felt weak, the hunger from days of skipping meals crashing into the adrenaline of the moment. I looked around. The dinner table had been cleared, but the tension in the room was thicker than before. Grandma Beatrice was sitting in her high-backed velvet chair, looking at me like I was a stranger she had caught stealing silverware. Brad was standing next to her, pouring himself another glass of brandy, looking entirely too relaxed for a man who had just been accused of fraud. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, stood awkwardly by the fireplace, holding a document. "Sophia Grandma Beatrice," said her voice ice-cold. "Since you are awake, perhaps you can explain this document that Mr. Henderson just showed me. Or are you going to faint again to avoid the question?" I pulled myself onto the sofa, my hands trembling. "What document?" I whispered. Brad stepped forward, a smooth, predatory smile playing on his lips. He pulled a piece of paper from the lawyer's folder and held it out to me, but he did not let me touch it. He held it just out of reach, like you would hold a treat for a dog. "It is the power of attorney you signed 3 years ago," Sophia, Brad said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Don't you remember? You were so overwhelmed with your mother's medical bills and your personal struggles. You asked me to help manage the Martha's Vineyard property so you wouldn't have to worry about the taxes and maintenance. You signed full administrative rights over to me." I stared at the paper. My vision blurred, then focused. There at the bottom of the page was a signature. Sophia Vance. It looked exactly like my handwriting. The loops on the S were wide. The V was sharp. It was perfect. But it was impossible. I looked up at Brad, then at Kesha. Suddenly, a memory from high school flashed in my mind. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table watching Kesha practice writing my name over and over again on a notepad. She used to forge my signature on her report card so Mom wouldn't see her failing grades. She had perfected my handwriting years ago. "I did not sign this," I said, my voice rising. I was in the hospital having my appendix removed on the date listed on this paper. Check the medical records. Kesha forged this. Kesha let out a dramatic gasp. She covered her mouth with her hand, looking at Grandma with wide, tearful eyes. Grandma, do you hear her? Now she is accusing me of being a criminal. First, she lies about being homeless, now this. She is jealous of my marriage, jealous of my life, so she tries to destroy us. Enough, Grandma Beatrice slammed her hand on the armrest of her chair. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She stood up, her small frame radiating a terrifying power. She walked over to me, snatched the paper from Brad, and shoved it into my face. I know your signature, Sophia, Grandma hissed. I have seen it on birthday cards for 30 years. This is your hand. Do not insult my intelligence. You signed this power of attorney because you are weak. You let a man handle your business because you were too lazy or too incompetent to do it yourself. And now you want to play the victim. Grandma, please. I begged, tears streaming down my face. Brad is lying. I did not know about the house. I did not know about the tenants. Stop lying, Beatrice screamed. Her face was red with rage. Brad just explained everything to me while you were pretending to be unconscious. He told me he found tenants for the house to help generate income for you. He said he has been sending you the rent checks every month for 2 years, $4,000 a month. My jaw dropped. Rent checks. I had never seen a dime. I looked at Brad. He gave me a tiny wink so subtle that only I could see it. I have the bank transfer receipts right here, Beatrice, Brad said, pulling out a stack of fabricated papers. I sent the money to the account Sophia gave me. If she squandered it on gambling or other habits, that is not my fault. I was just trying to be a good brother-in-law and protect the family asset. Grandma looked at the receipts, then looked at me with pure disgust. You have been receiving $4,000 a month plus a free $7 million home, and you show up here looking like a beggar claiming you sleep in a car. You are sick, Sophia. You are a pathological liar and a thief. You probably spent that rent money on drugs or debt, and now you have the audacity to come into my home on Thanksgiving and accuse this good man of fraud. No, I screamed, standing up. There is no money. There are no tenants. The people living in that house are Brad's parents. The room went silent again. Grandma looked at Brad. Brad shook his head sadly. Beatrice, she is hallucinating. My parents live in a retirement community in Florida. You know that? The people in the Martha's Vineyard house are a lovely, elderly couple named Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They are respectable tenants. Sophia is just making up wild stories because she got caught. Grandma turned back to me. Her eyes were hard as stone. There was no love left in them, only shame. Get out, she whispered. Grandma, Get out, she roared, pointing a shaking finger at the door. You are a disgrace to this family. You have taken my generosity and spat on it. I gave you a legacy and you turned it into a scheme. I do not want to see your face again until you bring me the full accounting of where that rent money went. And if you dare go near that property and harass Brad's tenants, I will have you arrested. But Grandma, please listen. Mr. Henderson, Grandma commanded. Escort her out, and change the gate codes. She is no longer welcome here. The lawyer stepped forward, looking apologetic but firm. Ms. Vance, please. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at my family one last time. Kesha was smirking, resting her head on Brad's shoulder. Brad was looking at his watch, bored. My aunts and uncles looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. They chose the comfortable lie over the difficult truth. They chose the successful white son-in-law over the struggling black daughter. I grabbed my worn-out purse and turned around. The walk to the front door felt like the longest walk of my life. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me with a finality that shook my bones. Outside, the weather had turned brutal. An ice storm had settled over Atlanta. The wind howled through the manicured trees of the estate. I walked down the long driveway, shivering violently in my thin coat. My car, a rusted 2012 Honda Civic that served as my bedroom. My closet and my safe haven was parked by the service gate. I climbed inside. The leather seats were freezing hard as rock. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and struggled to turn over. For a terrifying second, I thought it wouldn't start, leaving me trapped here. But finally, it roared to life with a noisy rattle. I turned on the heater, blowing cold air onto my frozen hands. I looked up at the mansion on the hill. The windows were glowing with golden light. I could see the silhouettes of my family moving around, resuming their dinner, laughing, drinking wine safe and warm. They had erased me. In the span of an hour, I had gone from a family member to a criminal. But as I sat there watching the snow accumulate on my windshield, something inside me shifted. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Brad had made a mistake. He had gotten greedy. He said there were tenants paying rent. He said his parents were in Florida. I shifted the car into drive. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. I was not going to a shelter. I was not going to find a bridge to sleep under. I checked my gas gauge. Half a tank, enough to get to the interstate. I am going to Martha's Vineyard, I said aloud to the empty car. I pulled out of the gate, leaving the warmth of the lies behind me, driving straight into the cold truth. I was going to find out exactly who was living in my house. And if Brad thought a forged piece of paper could stop a forensic accountant who had nothing left to lose, he was about to learn a very painful lesson. The drive from Atlanta to Massachusetts is long enough to break anyone's spirit, especially when you are driving a car with a broken heater and barely enough gas money to make it across state lines. I drove for 18 hours straight. I stopped only to use public restrooms and to nap for 20 minutes at a time in well-lit rest stops. My back ached, my eyes burned, and my stomach growled, but the anger kept me awake. Every mile I drove took me further away from the grandmother who disowned me, and closer to the truth that had ruined my life. I kept replaying the scene in the living room over and over in my head. The fake signature, the look of triumph on Kesha's face, the way Brad had winked at me. It was a perfect setup. They had used my name, my credit, and my family legacy to build a paradise for themselves, and then they had discarded me like trash when I became inconvenient. When I finally reached the ferry terminal for Martha's Vineyard, I had to count out my last crumpled bills to pay for the ticket. I stood on the deck of the ferry, the cold Atlantic wind whipping my hair across my face, watching the island get closer. This was a place for presidents, celebrities, and old money. It was not a place for a broke forensic accountant with a bruised ego and a 10-year-old Honda. I drove off the ferry and followed the GPS to Edgartown. The houses got bigger and the fences got higher the further I drove. Finally, the GPS announced I had arrived. I stopped the car and stared. 12 Ocean View Drive was not just a house. It was a masterpiece. It sat on a cliff overlooking the gray, churning ocean. It had cedar shingles that had weathered to a perfect silver-gray-white trim that sparkled even under the cloudy sky, and a manicured lawn that looked like a golf course. A long gravel driveway led up to the main house, lined with hydrangeas that were dormant for the winter, but clearly well-tended. And there, in the driveway of my house, was a scene that made my blood boil. Despite the cold weather, there were outdoor heaters set up on the expansive stone patio. A group of people were gathered around a stainless steel grill that looked like it cost more than my college tuition. I recognized them immediately. It was Mr. and Mrs. Harper, Brad's parents. They were not in a retirement home in Florida. They were here wearing cashmere sweaters and holding crystal wine glasses, laughing with a couple of neighbors. Mr. Harper was flipping steaks on the grill, looking like the lord of the manor. Mrs. Harper was arranging flowers on an outdoor dining table. They looked comfortable. They looked entitled. They looked like they belonged here. I felt a surge of nausea. This was the property Grandma Beatrice had bought for me. This was the asset that was supposed to secure my future. And here were two people who had never worked a day for my family living in it like royalty while I slept in a car. I parked my rusted Honda right in front of their pristine white gate. I didn't care that it blocked their view. I stepped out, smoothing down my wrinkled coat, trying to summon every ounce of dignity I had left. I punched in the gate code I remembered from the original deed paperwork I had seen years ago. Nothing happened. They had changed the code. I reached through the bars and pressed the intercom button. I held it down until the buzzing sound cut through their jazz music and laughter. I saw Mrs. Harper look up annoyed. She said something to her husband, set down her wine glass, and walked toward the gate. As she got closer, I could see the disdain on her face. She was a tall woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a string of pearls that probably cost $5,000. She looked at me through the bars, her eyes scanning my messy hair, my cheap coat, and my tired face. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just sighed a loud, exaggerated sound of impatience. "Oh, finally," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. "You are the girl from the catering agency, right? You are over an hour late. The guests are already hungry." I stared at her. She thought I was the help. Of course she did. In her world, a black woman standing at the gate in a beat-up car could only be there to serve food or clean toilets. "I am not the caterer," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Open the gate." Mrs. Harper let out a sharp laugh. "Excuse me. Do not take that tone with me, young lady. I do not care if the agency is short-staffed. If you want to get paid, you will go around to the service entrance on the north side of the property. Do not bring that ugly car into the main driveway. My husband just had the gravel raked." She turned to walk away, dismissing me as if I were a stray dog. "Mrs. Harper," I shouted, "I am not the help. I am Sophia Vance, and you are trespassing in my house." She stopped. Her back went stiff. She turned around slowly, her face transforming from annoyance to something colder, something dangerous. She walked back to the gate, gripping the iron bars with her manicured hands. "Oh," she said softly, "so you are Sophia. Brad warned us you might show up eventually." She didn't look scared. She didn't look guilty. She looked amused. "Warned you?" I asked, gripping the bars on my side. "Did he warn you that he stole this house? Did he warn you that I am going to have you evicted?" Mrs. Harper laughed again, a cruel, high-pitched sound that carried over the wind. "You really are delusional, aren't you? Brad told us about your mental problems. He told us how you get confused about reality. Honey, look at you. Look at your car. Look at your shoes. You don't own anything. You are a charity case. Brad lets us stay here to keep the property safe from people like you." "Open this gate!" I yelled, rattling the heavy iron. "Open it, or I am calling the police." "Go ahead," she challenged, pulling a sleek iPhone from her pocket. "Call them. The local sheriff plays golf with my husband every Sunday. Let us see who they believe. The retired judge living quietly in his son's vacation home, or the hysterical woman screaming at the gate?" She dialed a number and put the phone to her ear, staring me dead in the eye. "Brad, darling," she said into the phone, her voice suddenly sweet. "Yes, I am afraid you were right. That girl is here, the crazy one. Yes, she is making a scene at the gate. She is scaring the neighbors. No, don't worry, I will handle it. Just tell the police to hurry." She hung up and smiled at me, a smile that said she had already won. "You should run along now, Sophia," she said. "The police on this island are not very friendly to strangers who disturb the peace. Especially strangers who look like you." I stood there, my hands freezing on the cold metal of the gate. I watched her turn her back on me and walk back to her party. I watched Mr. Harper hand her a glass of wine. I watched them toast to the good life, my life, the life they had stolen. I didn't run, I didn't get back in my car. I pulled out my own phone. My hands were shaking not from cold but from rage. I dialed 911. "Emergency," the operator said. "I would like to report a break-in," I said, my voice steady and hard. "I am the owner of 12 Ocean View Drive, and there are intruders in my home." I knew Mrs. Harper was right about one thing. The police were coming. But she was wrong about everything else. She thought this was just a family dispute she could brush away with power and privilege. She didn't know that she had just started a war with a woman who knew how to follow every single penny. I hung up the phone and waited for the sirens, my eyes fixed on the house that was about to become a battlefield. The flashing blue and red lights of the police cruiser reflected against the wet pavement of the driveway. I stood by my rusted car with my arms crossed over my chest, trying to stop the shivering. When I saw the Edgartown police car pull up, I felt a momentary surge of relief. I believed that the law was black and white. I believed that a deed with my name on it meant ownership. I was about to learn that in places like Martha's Vineyard, the truth is often decided by who you know and how much money you appear to have. Two officers stepped out of the vehicle. They were both tall, broad-shouldered, and white. They did not look at me. They looked past me toward the Harpers who were standing on the heated patio, looking like the victims of a terrible inconvenience. "Officer," I called out, taking a step forward. "I am the one who called. My name is Sophia Vance. I am the owner of this property, and these people are trespassing." The older officer held up a hand to silence me without even making eye contact. He walked straight past me to the gate where Mr. Harper was waiting. I watched in disbelief as the officer's stern face softened into a friendly smile. "Good evening, Mr. Harper," the officer said, reaching out to shake the intruder's hand through the bars. "I am sorry for the disturbance." Mrs. Harper said there was a situation with a confused individual. I felt the air leave my lungs. They knew each other. Of course they knew each other. "Officer," I shouted, my voice cracking with frustration. "He is not the homeowner. I am. I have the digital copy of the deed right here on my phone. Please look at it." Finally, the officer turned to me. His eyes were cold and suspicious. He looked at my messy hair, my cheap coat, and my old car. Then he looked back at the Harpers in their cashmere and pearls. The judgment was instantaneous. "Ma'am, keep your voice down, or I will detain you for disorderly conduct," the officer warned. He turned back to Mr. Harper. "Sir, do you have proof of residency?" Mr. Harper put on a performance worthy of an award. He looked sad and weary, like a grandfather who was being bullied. "Yes, officer," he said, pulling a folded document from his sweater pocket. "My son bought this house for us years ago, but because of tax reasons, it was put in the name of his sister-in-law, this young woman here. We have a signed lease agreement granting us tenancy for life." He handed the paper through the gate. The officer took it and shined his flashlight on the page. I ran to the gate, gripping the bars. "That is a lie," I screamed. "I never signed a lease. Let me see that paper." The officer ignored me and read the document aloud. "It says here that Sophia Vance grants Robert and Mary Harper a lifetime lease of the property at 12 Ocean View Drive for the sum of $1 per year, signed and dated 3 years ago." $1, I choked out. "You think I rented a $7 million estate for $1 a year? It is a forgery, can't you see that?" The officer handed the paper back to Mr. Harper. "It looks legal to me, ma'am. It is notarized." Just then, Mrs. Harper walked up holding her iPad. The screen was bright, showing a video call. It was Brad. He was sitting in his home office in Atlanta, wearing a suit, looking composed and professional. Officer Brad's voice came through the iPad speakers, smooth and apologetic. "I am so sorry you had to come out there. I am Brad Miller, the family asset manager." The officer nodded at the screen. "Mr. Miller, we have a woman here claiming she owns the place and wants your parents evicted." Brad sighed, a sound of deep, pained exhaustion. "Yes, that is my sister-in-law, Sophia. Look, officer, this is a private family medical matter. Sophia has been struggling with some significant mental health issues lately. She goes off her medication and gets very confused about reality. She thinks she owns everything. We have been trying to get her help, but she ran away from the intervention we held at Thanksgiving dinner." My mouth fell open. I looked at the iPad, seeing Brad's fake, sympathetic face. He was not just stealing my house. He was stealing my sanity. He was painting me as the crazy, angry black woman so that no one would ever believe a word I said. "Brad," I yelled at the screen, "tell them the truth. Tell them you forged my signature." "Sophia, please," Brad said softly, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are having an episode. Just get back in your car and go home. We can talk about this when you are stable. The officer turned to me, his hand resting on his belt near his taser. He had heard enough. In his mind, the story made perfect sense. The wealthy white family was being harassed by the unstable relative. "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice hard. "This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. Mr. Harper has a valid lease and the family confirms you are not to be here. You are trespassing on private property." "Trespassing?" I repeated, tears of rage stinging my eyes. "It is my name on the deed." "It does not matter," the officer stepped closer, invading my personal space. "You have two choices. You can get in that vehicle and leave this island immediately, or I can arrest you for harassment and trespassing. And I promise you, if I arrest you, you will not be making bail anytime soon." I looked at the officer. I looked at the Harpers who were smirking behind the safety of the gate. I looked at Brad on the screen, who gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod of victory. I realized then that screaming would not help me, crying would not help me. The law was not here to protect me. It was here to protect the status quo. Brad had weaponized the entire system against me. He had the fake papers, the fake narrative, and the privilege to make the police his personal security guards. If I got arrested tonight, I would lose everything. I would lose my license to practice accounting. I would lose my chance to fight back. I took a deep breath, forcing the fire in my chest to cool down into a block of ice. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the forensic accountant, not the victim. "I understand, officer," I said quietly. My voice was steady. "I am leaving." I turned around and walked back to my car. I could feel Mrs. Harper's gaze burning into my back. I could hear Mr. Harper thanking the officer for his service. I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the door. As I started the engine, I looked at the house one last time. I memorized every detail. I memorized the license plate of the officer's car. I memorized the smug look on Brad's face on that screen. They thought they had won. They thought they had scared me off. They thought I was just a confused, helpless girl who would drive away and disappear into the night. But as I drove away from the cliffside mansion, watching the police cruiser follow me to ensure I left the town limits, I wasn't thinking about giving up. I was thinking about the paper trail. Brad said he rented the house for $1. That meant there was no rental income declared on the taxes. But Grandma Beatrice believed I was receiving $4,000 a month. That meant Brad was taking money from the family trust to pay a rent that didn't exist. He had made a mistake, an arrogant, sloppy mistake. He thought the police could save him. But the police don't check ledgers. I do. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I was not going back to Atlanta. I was going to the one place where facts still mattered. I pulled over at the first gas station outside of town and reached for my laptop bag in the back seat. It was time to stop being the sister and start being the auditor. The real war had just begun. I parked my car on a dark service road about a mile away from the estate. I turned off the engine and the headlights and sat in the silence of the night. The clock on my dashboard read 2 a.m. My stomach was twisting with hunger and fear, but my mind was razor sharp. I watched the distant lights of the mansion flicker and finally go dark. The party was over. The guests had gone home. Brad and his parents were sleeping in my beds under my roof, thinking they had successfully scared me off. I pulled up the hood of my coat and stepped out into the freezing wind. I walked along the edge of the woods, avoiding the gravel driveway that would crunch under my boots. I moved like a ghost toward the back of the property where the service entrance was located. I knew from my years of auditing wealthy clients that they always made one fatal mistake. They were careless with their garbage. They believed that once something was thrown in a bin, it ceased to exist. When I reached the back of the garage, I saw them. 3 large blue recycling bins lined up neatly against the wall. My heart was pounding in my chest. If the motion sensor lights turned on, or if Mrs. Harper woke up and looked out the window, I would be arrested for sure. This time, there would be no warning. I lifted the lid of the first bin. Empty wine bottles, dozens of them. Expensive vintage Cabernet that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. I closed it and moved to the second bin. It was full of food waste from the catering. The smell made my empty stomach cramp violently, but I forced myself to keep looking. I opened the third bin. It was filled with paper. My pulse quickened. I reached in and pulled out a handful. It was junk mail mostly, catalogs for yachts, for flyers for charity galas. But as I dug deeper toward the bottom, I felt the texture of something different. Thicker paper, bond paper, the kind used for official banking documents. I pulled out a heavy black trash bag that had been stuffed at the very bottom. It was ripped open and inside were hundreds of strips of paper. They had used a shredder, but it was a cheap strip shredder, not a cross-cut one. It was the kind of laziness I saw all the time in corporate fraud cases. The arrogance of thinking no one would ever bother to tape the pieces back together. I grabbed the bag and ran. I ran back through the woods, clutching the garbage bag to my chest like it was a bag of diamonds. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. I drove to a 24-hour truck stop about 10 miles away. I parked in the back corner of the lot under a flickering street lamp. I reclined my seat and dumped the contents of the bag onto my lap in the passenger seat. For the next 4 hours, I did not move. I did not blink. I became a machine. I had a roll of clear Scotch tape in my glove compartment, a remnant from when I used to wrap Christmas presents for the family that now hated me. I turned on my dome light and started the work. This was what I was born to do. This was forensic accounting in its rawest form. I sorted the strips by color, then by font, then by the jagged edges of the tears. Piece by piece, the truth began to take shape. The first document I reconstructed was a bank statement from a bank in the Cayman Islands. The account holder name was Sophia Vance. I stared at my name typed in bold black letters. I had never been to the Cayman Islands. I had never opened this account. I taped the next section together. It was the transaction history for the last 6 months. The numbers made my breath catch in my throat. October 1st. Incoming wire transfer. $50,000. Source Beatrice Vance Holdings. October 2nd. Outgoing wire transfer. $48,000. Destination Horizon Investment Group, Zurich. I kept taping. November 1st. Incoming. $75,000. Source Beatrice Vance Holdings. November 2nd. Outgoing. $72,000. Destination Horizon Investment Group, Zurich. I reconstructed 3 months of statements. The pattern was identical every single time. Large sums of money were being siphoned out of my grandmother's company disguised as consulting fees or property maintenance costs. They were deposited into this fake account under my name to make it look like I was the one stealing the money. Then, within 24 hours, the money was moved offshore to this mysterious Horizon Investment Group in Switzerland. I sat back in my seat feeling the blood drain from my face. This was not just about stealing a vacation home. The house was just a prop. It was a shell address used to legitimize a massive money laundering operation. I realized then why Brad had been so desperate to get me out of the house, why he had forged the lease for his parents. He needed someone living there to make the utility bills look real, so the maintenance costs he was billing to my grandmother would not look suspicious. His parents were not just squatters. They were human shields protecting a multi-million-dollar crime. I picked up another strip of paper. It was a handwritten note on Brad's personal stationery. It was torn in half, but I matched the pieces easily. It read, "Dad, make sure you burn the mail that comes for Sophia. Do not let the postman see you taking it. I will be up on the weekend to collect the cash from the safe." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Cash. There was a safe in the house. My mind raced back to the Thanksgiving dinner. Brad's arrogance, Kesha's nervousness. They were not just mean relatives, they were felons. They were using my identity to steal from my grandmother and funneling the wealth into their own private offshore accounts. If the IRS ever audited my grandmother, they would see the money going to Sophia Vance. I would be the one going to prison for embezzlement and tax evasion. Brad would be untraceable, safe in Switzerland with his millions. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 6 in the morning. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky a bruised purple. I looked down at the taped-together documents scattered across my lap. They were ugly and crumpled and smelled like stale wine, but they were the most beautiful things I had ever seen. They were my weapon. But they were not enough. A few taped-together bank statements from a trash can would not hold up in court against Brad's high-priced lawyers. They would say I forged them just like they said I forged the deed. They would say I was crazy. I needed the source. I needed to trace that Swiss account. I needed to know who owned Horizon Investment Group. I opened my laptop. It had 12% battery left. I tethered it to my phone's weak signal. I logged into a database that I still had access to from my old job. It was a global registry of corporate entities. It was expensive to use, and I was technically violating my severance agreement by accessing it, but I didn't care. I typed in Horizon Investment Group. No results. It was a ghost company. I tried searching by the Swift code on the bank statement. Nothing. I felt a wave of despair. Brad was smart. He had hidden his tracks well. Then I looked at the handwritten note again. The one about the safe. I will be up on the weekend to collect the cash. Cash left no paper trail. If Brad was keeping physical cash in the house, it meant he was dealing with people who didn't take wire transfers. It meant the scheme was even dirtier than I thought. I looked out the window at the rising sun. I had two choices. I could drive back to Atlanta and try to beg Grandma to listen to me, which would likely end with another restraining order. Or I could stay here. I looked at the reconstructed statement again. The date of the next transfer was usually the 1st of the month. Today was November 29th. In 2 days, another massive wire transfer would hit the fake account. If I could access the digital banking for this Cayman Islands account, I could track the IP address of the person logging in. I could prove it was Brad. But I didn't have the password. I looked at the trash bag again. Was there anything else? I dug through the bottom of the bag one last time. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. It was an old smartphone. The screen was cracked and shattered. It looked like someone had smashed it against a wall and then thrown it away. I picked it up. It was a burner phone. The kind criminals use. I plugged it into my car charger. The red battery icon flashed. "Please," I whispered. "Please turn on." I waited 5 agonizing minutes. Finally, the screen flickered to life. It was password protected, of course, but the screen was so badly cracked that the touch sensors were glitching. I watched as a notification popped up on the lock screen. It was an automated text message from the bank. "Your two-factor authentication code is 8944. Do not share this with anyone." I stared at the number. The timestamp was from yesterday afternoon. This was the phone Brad used to authorize the transfers. He must have upgraded to a new one and smashed this one thinking it was destroyed, but the SIM card was still inside. I didn't need to unlock the phone. I just need the SIM card. I popped the SIM card tray open, using my earring. I took the tiny chip out and held it in my palm. This tiny piece of plastic was the key to the kingdom. If I put this in my phone, I could receive the two-factor authentication codes for the bank account. I could reset the password. I could get into the account. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I wasn't just going to report Brad. I was going to watch him in real time as he committed the crime. And when the moment was right, I was going to lock him out of his own getaway car. I started my engine. The car roared to life, sounding less like a dying animal and more like a battle cry. I wasn't going back to sleep. I had work to do. I needed to find a place with strong Wi-Fi, and I needed to call the only person in the world who hated Brad as much as I did. It was time to build my army. The neon sign of the 24-hour diner flickered outside the window, casting a red glow over my table. I sat there with a cup of cold coffee and my phone in my hand. I had the evidence. I had the burner phone SIM card. I had the reconstructed bank statements. I had everything I needed to destroy Brad. But there was one loose end that I could not cut. Kesha, my little sister. The girl I had walked to school when our mother was working double shifts. The girl I had helped with homework. The girl I had protected from bullies. Despite everything that happened at Thanksgiving, despite the lies and the forgery, a small, foolish part of me still wanted to believe she was a victim. I wanted to believe that Brad was abusing her, forcing her to lie, manipulating her into signing those documents. If she was a victim, I could save her. If she was accomplice, I would have to destroy her too. I needed to know the truth before I pulled the trigger. I dialed her number. My thumb hovered over the record button on my screen. I pressed it. The timer started counting up. 0102. The phone rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when the line clicked open. "What do you want, Sophia?" Her voice was not fearful. It was annoyed. She sounded like I had interrupted her while she was watching a movie. "Kesha," I said, keeping my voice low so the waitress wouldn't hear. "I am only going to ask you this once. Are you safe?" She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Am I safe?" "Sophia, I am sitting in a heated sunroom drinking imported tea. Of course I am safe. Where are you? Sleeping under a bridge yet?" I ignored the insult. "Kesha, I know about the accounts. I know about the Cayman Islands. I know Brad is laundering money through a fake account in my name. I found the shredded documents. I found his burner phone." There was a silence on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought she might panic. I thought she might start crying and tell me she was sorry that Brad made her do it. Instead, she sighed. The sound was filled with boredom. "So you went digging through the trash. That is just so typical of you, Sophia. Always digging in the dirt while the rest of us are trying to live in the clouds." "Kesha, listen to me." I pleaded, my grip on the phone tightening. "This is a federal crime. Money laundering, wire fraud, identity theft. If I go to the FBI, Brad is going to prison for 20 years. If you helped him, you are going down too. I can help you. If you tell me he forced you to sign those papers, I can get you a deal. I can protect you. Just tell me the truth. Did he make you do it?" Kesha let out a long, cruel laugh that made my stomach turn. "Oh, Sophia," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You still don't get it, do you? You think you are the hero of this story. You think you are the big sister coming to save the poor, helpless princess. Brad didn't force me to do anything. I signed those papers because I wanted to. I felt the blood drain from my face. You what?" "I signed them," she repeated slowly, enjoying every word. "Do you know how much a Porsche Cayenne costs, Sophia? Do you know how hard it is to get a platinum Hermes Birkin bag? Brad promised me that if I helped him with this little real estate arrangement, I could have whatever I wanted. And he delivered. I drive a car worth more than your entire life. I wear clothes you couldn't afford in your dreams. And all I had to do was let his parents stay in an empty house that you weren't even using." "But it's my house," I whispered. "Grandma bought it for me. It was our family legacy." "Legacy," Kesha scoffed. "That is a joke. Grandma is old and senile. She was going to waste that money anyway. Brad knows how to make money grow. He is a genius. And unlike you, he treats me like a queen. You want me to betray my husband for what? For loyalty. Loyalty doesn't pay for first-class flights, Sophia. Loyalty doesn't get you into the country club." I closed my eyes. The image of the little girl I used to carry on my back vanished, replaced by the monster speaking to me on the phone. "He is using you, Kesha," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "He is putting everything in my name and your name. When this blows up, and it will blow up, he is going to have his bags packed for a non-extradition country. He will leave you behind to take the fall. He doesn't love you. He loves that you are stupid enough to sign his crimes." "Don't you call me stupid," she snapped, her voice rising. "You are the stupid one. You are the one living in a car. You are the one with no friends, no husband, and no money. And let me tell you something else, big sister. You can go to the FBI. You can go to the police. It won't matter. Why, I asked. Because Brad is a white man on Wall Street, and you are a broke black woman with a history of instability, Kesha said. Her words were calculated to hurt in the deepest possible way. He knows the game, Sophia. He plays golf with the judges. He drinks scotch with the prosecutors. He has the complexion for protection. Who are they going to believe? The successful investment manager or the jealous homeless sister who has been harassing his elderly parents? You are a nobody. You are a failure. Go ahead and fight him. You will only end up in a cell. I sat there in the diner listening to my own sister use the racism of the system as a weapon against me. She had sold her soul for a handbag. She had sold her sister for a car. She had internalized every hateful thing the world thought about us, and she was using it to destroy me. Is that all? I asked, my voice suddenly very calm. Yes, that is all, Kesha said. Do us both a favor. Disappear. Go find a shelter. Stop embarrassing the family. I looked at the timer on my screen. 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Every word recorded. Every confession captured. Goodbye, Kesha, I said. I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I sat in the silence for a long time. I looked at the coffee cup. I looked at my hands. I expected to cry. I expected to feel heartbroken. But instead, I felt lighter. The burden of protecting Kesha was gone. The weight of being the big sister was gone. She had made her choice. She had chosen the Portia over her blood. She had chosen the oppressor over her family. I saved the recording and uploaded it to 3 different cloud servers. Then I emailed a copy to a secure drive. Kesha was right about one thing. Brad knew the game. He knew how to play the system. But she was wrong about me. I wasn't just a broke black woman. I was a forensic accountant who had just been handed a confession on a silver platter. She thought her husband was untouchable because of his skin color and his bank account. She forgot that numbers don't see color. Numbers don't care about country clubs. Numbers don't lie. I stood up and left a $5 tip on the table. It was the last of my cash, but I didn't care. I walked out of the diner and into the morning sun. I wasn't Sophia the sister anymore. I wasn't Sophia the granddaughter. I was Sophia the auditor. And I was about to close the books on this entire family. I got back into my car and opened my laptop. I had the SIM card. I had the bank statements. And now, thanks to Kesha's arrogance, I had the motive and the confession. It was time to stop digging in the trash and start digging their graves. I typed in the number for the one man who could help me turn this evidence into an indictment. It was time to call the FBI. The drive back to Atlanta felt different than the drive up. I wasn't running away anymore. I was driving toward a war. I had the burner phone in my pocket and the confession on the cloud. I thought I was ahead of the game. I thought I had the element of surprise. But I had forgotten one crucial thing about Brad. He was a man who spent his entire life manipulating markets and controlling narratives. He didn't just play defense. He played scorched earth. I was crossing the state line into Georgia when my phone started buzzing. It wasn't a call. It was a notification. Then another. Then 100. My phone vibrated so hard it rattled against the cup holder. I glanced down and saw the logo of a popular Atlanta gossip blog that covered the city's black elite. The headline made me slam on my brakes and pull onto the shoulder of the highway. It read, "Disgraced Vance heiress caught in drug-fueled embezzlement scandal." My hands were shaking as I unlocked the screen. There was a photo of me. It was taken from a distance probably 2 days ago when I was sleeping in my car. My hair was messy, my eyes were dark with exhaustion, and I looked disheveled. But the caption didn't say I was homeless. It said I was high. I scrolled down, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The article was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed that Sophia Vance, the granddaughter of the esteemed Beatrice Vance, had been fired from her accounting firm for stealing client funds to support a severe opioid addiction. It cited anonymous sources close to the family. Brad. He had not just stolen my money. He was destroying my credibility before I could even open my mouth. He knew that if I went to the police now, I wouldn't look like a whistleblower. I would look like a desperate junkie trying to blackmail her successful family. I opened my email. My inbox was flooded. The first email was from the State Board of Accountancy. The subject line was, "Notice of immediate suspension. Dear Ms. Vance, due to credible allegations of gross professional misconduct and misappropriation of funds, your CPA license has been temporarily suspended pending a full ethics board review. You are hereby ordered to cease all professional activities immediately." I dropped the phone in my lap. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My license was my life. It was the one thing I had built that had nothing to do with my grandmother's name. It was my shield, my identity, and my only way to make a living. Brad had taken a torch to it in less than an hour. Then the second bomb dropped. A news alert popped up on my screen. This one was from the Financial News Network. Beatrice Vance Holdings stock plummets 10% following rumors of family embezzlement scandal. CEO Beatrice Vance rushed to St. Mary's Hospital after collapsing at her home. Grandma. I didn't think. I didn't care about the license. I didn't care about the lies. I threw the car into drive and floored the gas pedal. The speedometer climbed past 80, then 90. I wove through traffic, tears streaming down my face. Brad had calculated this too. He knew the news would break her heart. He knew the stress would be too much for her fragile heart. He wasn't just a thief. He was a killer. I reached St. Mary's Hospital in record time. I abandoned my car in the emergency loading zone and ran through the automatic doors. My boots squeaked on the linoleum floor. I looked wild. I looked exactly like the drug addict Brad said I was. I ran to the front desk. "My grandmother!" I gasped, gripping the counter. "Beatrice Vance. Is she okay? Where is she?" The nurse looked up, her eyes widening as she recognized me. She didn't look sympathetic. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and judgment. She slowly reached for the phone on her desk. "Miss Vance," she said, her voice tight. "You need to leave." "I am not leaving," I shouted. "That is my grandmother. Is she alive?" Before the nurse could answer, a heavy hand grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. It was my Uncle Marcus. He was a large man, usually jovial, but today his face was twisted in a snarl of pure hatred. Behind him stood my Aunt Sarah and two of my cousins. They formed a wall between me and the elevators. "You," Uncle Marcus spat, shoving me backward. "You have the nerve to show your face here, after what you did." "Uncle Marcus, please," I begged, holding up my hands. "It is a lie. Brad is lying. I didn't steal anything." "Don't you say his name!" Aunt Sarah screamed, stepping forward. Her eyes were red from crying. "Brad is the only one holding this family together while you tear it apart. He is in there right now, paying for the best cardiologists in the state. He is saving her life while you try to kill her." "No," I cried. "He caused this. He released that story. He is laundering money, Aunt Sarah. You have to believe me." "Believe you?" Uncle Marcus laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Look at you, Sophia. Look at the news. We saw the bank records Brad showed us. We saw the transfers to your account. You stole from the woman who raised you to buy drugs, and now she is lying in a coma because her heart couldn't take the shame." A coma. The word hit me like a physical blow. Grandma was in a coma. "I need to see her," I whispered. "I need to tell her I didn't do it." "You are not going anywhere near her," Uncle Marcus said. He signaled to the hospital security guards who were running toward us. "We have already spoken to the administration. You are banned from the premises. If you try to go up to the VIP floor, we will press charges for harassment." The security guards grabbed my arms. They weren't gentle. They dragged me backward toward the exit. "Wait!" I screamed, fighting against their grip. "You are protecting the wrong person. He is going to take everything. Check the accounts. Just check the accounts." My family didn't listen. They turned their backs on me. I watched as Brad walked out of the elevator. He was wearing a pristine suit, looking somber and concerned. He walked over to Aunt Sarah and hugged her. He looked over her shoulder and met my eyes as the guards dragged me out. He didn't smile this time. He just stared at me with cold, dead eyes. He had taken my home. He had taken my career. He had taken my reputation. And now he had taken the only family I had left. The guards threw me out onto the sidewalk. "Stay away from here," one of them warned. "We don't want trouble with junkies." I stood up, brushing the dirt off my coat. People walking by stared at me. I could hear them whispering, "That is her. That is the granddaughter who stole the money." I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. The silence in the car was deafening. I had never felt so alone in my life. I had the evidence, but I had no voice. I had the truth, but no one to listen. My phone pinged again. It was an email from Brad. The subject line was simple: Checkmate. I opened it. There was no text, just a PDF attachment. It was a restraining order filed an hour ago, granting him full medical power of attorney over Beatrice Vance due to her incapacitation. He had total control. He controlled the company. He controlled the money. And now he controlled whether my grandmother lived or died. I put my head on the steering wheel and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw. I screamed until the windows fogged up. But then I stopped. I looked at the hospital building looming over me. I thought about Grandma lying in that bed, helpless, with a viper sitting by her side, holding her hand. He thought he had buried me. He thought he had stripped me of everything that made me powerful. But he had made one miscalculation. He had taken away my fear. When you have lost your reputation, your family, and your livelihood, you have nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. I wiped my face. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to go cry in a corner. I had one card left to play. A card Brad didn't know I had. I needed an ally who didn't care about gossip blogs or stock prices. I needed someone who hated Brad almost as much as I did. I drove away from the hospital, leaving my heart behind, and headed toward the one office in Atlanta that Brad Miller was terrified of. I was going to see Mr. Carter, my grandmother's oldest rival. I drove straight to the towering glass building in downtown Atlanta that housed Carter Industries. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles were white. Elijah Carter was a legend in this city, not because he was loved, but because he was feared. He was my grandmother's oldest rival. 30 years ago, Beatrice Vance had outmaneuvered him in a hostile takeover that cost him millions. He had hated the Vance name ever since. Most people would run away from a man like that. But I was banking on the fact that his hatred for my family was exactly what I needed. I parked my rusted Honda in between two gleaming Mercedes sedans in the visitor lot. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red and puffy. My hair was a disaster. My coat was stained with dirt from the hospital sidewalk. I looked exactly like the drug addict the news articles said I was. But I didn't care. I grabbed my laptop bag and marched toward the entrance. The security guard at the front desk looked at me with immediate suspicion. He started to reach for his radio, probably to call the police, but I slammed my hand on the marble counter before he could speak. "Tell Elijah Carter that Sophia Vance is here," I said, my voice low and steady. "Tell him I have the tax returns he has been trying to find for the last decade." It was a bluff, of course. I didn't have his tax returns. But I knew enough about corporate warfare to know that information was the only currency men like Carter respected. The guard hesitated. He made a call. 2 minutes later, I was being escorted to the top floor. Elijah Carter was sitting behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of obsidian. He was an older man with silver hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. He didn't stand up when I walked in. He just stared at me with a look of amused disgust. "Well, well," Carter said, his voice deep and gravelly. "If it isn't the prodigal granddaughter. I saw the news, Sophia. Embezzlement, drugs. It seems the apple doesn't fall far from the rotten tree. Did you come here to beg for a job cleaning my floors?" I didn't flinch. I walked straight to one of the leather chairs opposite his desk and sat down without being invited. "I am not a junkie, Mr. Carter," I said, locking eyes with him. "And I am not here to beg. I am here to make a trade." He laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "A trade? You have nothing, Sophia. Your assets are frozen. Your license is suspended. You are radioactive. Why shouldn't I call security and have you thrown out right now?" "Because I am the best forensic accountant in the Southeast," I said. I leaned forward. "You are currently in a bidding war for the acquisition of the Delta Logistics Group. You are losing because their valuation is too high. But I know that their CFO has been hiding liabilities in shell companies to inflate their stock price." Carter stopped laughing. He leaned forward, his interest piqued. "How do you know that?" "Because I audited their subsidiary 3 years ago." I lied smoothly. "I didn't audit them, but I knew the patterns. I can find the hole in their books in 24 hours. I can save you $50 million on that acquisition. And once I am done with them, I can look at your own books. I know you are overpaying on your capital gains taxes. I can find you legal loopholes that your current accountants are too scared to use." Carter looked at me for a long time. He was assessing me not as a person, but as an asset. He saw the desperation, but he also saw the intelligence. He saw the hunger. "And what do you want in return?" he asked. "Money." "No," I said. "I don't want your money. I want a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I want a shark. I want someone who isn't afraid of the Vance family name. Someone who can file a federal injunction before my grandmother's lawyers can even finish their morning coffee. And I want security. I want 2 armed guards who answer only to me." Carter sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "You want to go to war with your own family." "They are not my family anymore," I said, my voice cold. "They are my targets. Brad Miller has stolen my identity and is killing my grandmother. I am going to bury him. But I need a shield while I load the gun." Carter smiled. It was a terrifying smile. He picked up his phone and pressed a button. "Get me Stanton on the line," he barked, "and tell the head of security to send 2 men to my office immediately." He hung up and looked at me. "Stanton is the nastiest litigator in the state. He would sue his own mother for a parking ticket. He is yours." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Carter warned. "You have 24 hours to find that dirt on Delta Logistics. If you fail, I will throw you to the wolves myself." "I won't fail," I said, standing up. I spent the next 12 hours in a conference room at Carter Industries. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I tore through the financial records Carter gave me like a woman possessed. By sunrise, I had found the discrepancy. It was a classic revenue recognition error hidden in their offshore shipping manifests. It was enough to tank their stock price and give Carter the leverage he needed. When I handed the report to Carter the next morning, he looked at it and nodded. "You are good," he admitted. "Better than my entire team." He handed me a black credit card. "Buy yourself some clothes," he said. "You look like a victim. If you are going to destroy Brad Miller, you need to look like a predator." I took the card and walked out of the building. My first stop was not a clothing store. It was a salon. I sat in the chair and looked at myself in the mirror one last time. The long hair that my mother always loved. The soft curls that Kesha used to braid. It was the hair of a girl who wanted to be liked. A girl who wanted to please everyone. "Cut it off," I told the stylist. "All of it," she asked, looking shocked. "All of it," I said. "I want it sharp. I want it short." I watched as the locks of hair fell to the floor. With every snip, I felt lighter. I was cutting away the trauma. I was cutting away the fear. I was cutting away the Sophia who cried in her car. When the stylist was done, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Her cheekbones looked sharper, her eyes looked bigger and fiercer. She looked dangerous. I went to the most expensive boutique in the city. I didn't look at the price tags. I bought a tailored black suit that fit like armor. I bought stilettos that sounded like gunshots when I walked. I bought a leather briefcase to replace my old laptop bag. I walked out of the dressing room and stood in front of the full-length mirror. The homeless girl was gone. The drug addict from the news articles was gone. Standing there was a woman who commanded respect. A woman who looked like she owned the building. A woman who looked like she could audit God himself. I walked out of the store and my 2 new bodyguards fell into step behind me. They were massive men in dark suits who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. I checked my phone. I had a missed call from Stanton the lawyer. He had filed the motions. He had blocked the sale of the Martha's Vineyard house. He had alerted the FBI to the wire transfers. The pieces were in place. Brad thought he had won because he had silenced the victim. But he had forgotten the first rule of accounting. Everything must balance. He had taken everything from me. Now I was coming to collect the debt. I got into the back of the black SUV Carter had provided. "Where to?" Ms. Vance, the driver, asked. "Take me to the office," I said. "Not Carter's office. Brad's office. It is time to pay my brother-in-law a visit." I smoothed the lapel of my new suit. I wasn't Sophia the sister anymore. I wasn't Sophia the scapegoat. I was the auditor, and the audit was about to begin. The tinted windows of the black SUV shielded me from the glare of the Atlanta sun as we pulled into the underground parking garage of a nondescript building owned by Mr. Carter. This was not a standard office. This was a war room. The 2 security guards flanked me as I walked into the soundproof conference room where 3 of Carter's best cybersecurity analysts were already waiting. They had set up a bank of monitors that glowed with streams of code and data. I sat at the head of the table and placed the burner phone SIM card and my reconstructed bank statements in the center. I did not need to give a motivational speech. These men were professionals. They knew exactly what we were looking for. "Target is Brad Miller," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "I have the IP address from his burner device and the SWIFT codes for his offshore accounts. He thinks he is hiding behind a firewall. I want you to tear it down." The lead analyst, a man named Davis, nodded and plugged the SIM card into a forensic reader. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the hum of cooling fans and the rhythmic clacking of keyboards. I watched the screens with the intensity of a hawk. I wasn't just looking for money. I was looking for the soul of the man who destroyed my life. "Got him," Davis said quietly. "He is using a cloud server hosted in Panama, but he routed the admin access through his home Wi-Fi. Sloppy. Very sloppy." I leaned forward. "Put it on the main screen." The large monitor on the wall flickered and then resolved into a virtual desktop. It was Brad's private server. It was the digital brain of his entire operation. I saw folders labeled with innocuous names like Family Vacation and Recipes. "Open the folder labeled Recipes," I ordered. Brad was arrogant, but he wasn't creative. Davis clicked the folder. It wasn't recipes. It was a labyrinth of spreadsheets. Hundreds of them. This was it. The shadow ledger. In forensic accounting, we call this the second set of books. Every criminal has one. The first set is what you show the IRS and your investors. It is clean and balanced and full of lies. The second set is for the criminal himself, so he knows where the money actually is. I stood up and walked to the screen. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers faster than the analyst could read them. I traced the flow of funds from my grandmother's company, Beatrice Vance Holdings, into Brad's personal accounts. Scroll down to the pension fund allocation, I said, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. Davis scrolled. The screen filled with red text. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. The pension fund. The money my grandmother had set aside for the hundreds of employees who had worked for her for decades was supposed to have $25 million in secure bonds. The balance on the screen read 0. "He took it all," I whispered. "He didn't just skim off the top, he drained it dry." "Where did it go?" I asked, pointing to the transfer column. Davis opened the transaction history. The money had been moved in massive chunks to an exchange I recognized immediately. It was a cryptocurrency exchange known for its lack of regulation. He was gambling. I said, the realization settling over me like a cold shroud. He took $25 million of hard-earned retirement money and bet it on speculative coins. I looked at the dates. He bought in at the peak of the market 3 months ago. Then the crash happened. I watched the value of his portfolio plummet on the screen. 20 million, 10 million, 5 million. And finally nothing. He lost it. I said, my voice shaking with rage. He lost $20 million. That is why he needed to sell the company. That is why he needed to merge with Carter Industries. He is insolvent. He is trying to fill a $20 million black hole before anyone notices. But that wasn't the worst part. Check the real estate assets I commanded. Search for 12 Ocean View Drive. Davis typed in the address of the Martha's Vineyard house. A new document popped up. It wasn't a deed. It was a loan agreement. My eyes widened as I read the terms. Brad had used the power of attorney, the one with my forged signature, to take out a loan against the house. But he didn't go to a regular bank. A regular bank would have asked too many questions. He went to a shadow lender, a company called Ironclad Capital. I knew them. They were essentially loan sharks in expensive suits. They charged predatory interest rates, and they didn't foreclose through the courts. They seized assets aggressively. Look at the status, I said, pointing to the bottom line. Notice of default. Brad hadn't paid the mortgage in 4 months. The loan was called in. The house is gone, I said. He mortgaged it for $4 million, lost that money in the crypto crash too, and now Ironclad Capital is coming for the keys. I thought about Mr. and Mrs. Harper sitting on that heated patio drinking wine, thinking they owned the world. They had no idea. They were living in a house that was about to be seized by repo men. Brad had lied to everyone. He lied to his wife. He lied to his parents. He lied to my grandmother. He wasn't a financial genius. He was a desperate, drowning man pulling everyone down with him. Print everything, I said. My voice was ice cold. Print the pension theft. Print the crypto losses. Print the foreclosure notice. And print the audit logs showing he accessed these accounts from his personal IP address. As the printer whirred to life, spitting out page after page of damning evidence, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the cold precision of the executioner. I picked up the stack of papers. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon in my hands. Mr. Carter walked into the room. He looked at the stack of papers and then at my face. "Did you find it?" he asked. "I found more than tax evasion," I said, placing the documents in my leather briefcase. "I found a $20 million motive for murder." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Murder? He is killing my grandmother," I said. "The stress of this scandal is what put her in the hospital. If she dies, he inherits control before the theft is discovered. He needs her dead so he can bury the bodies of his financial crimes." I snapped the briefcase shut. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. "I need a car," I said, "and I need Stanton to meet me." "Where are you going?" Carter asked. "I am going to the hospital," I said. "But not as a visitor. I am going as the person who is about to save Beatrice Vance's life and end Brad Miller's." "But you are banned," Carter reminded me. "The restraining order." I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Restraining orders work on family members," I said. "They don't work on federal witnesses carrying evidence of a massive felony. I am not going to ask for permission to enter. I am going to kick the door down." I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the concrete floor. The data in my briefcase was enough to put Brad away for life. It was enough to evict his parents. It was enough to free my grandmother. The audit was complete. Now it was time to present the findings. And the presentation was going to be lethal. The scrubs were scratchy against my skin and 2 sizes too big, but they were the best shield I had. I pulled the surgical mask up over my nose and adjusted the badge clipped to my chest. It belonged to a nurse named Brenda, who was currently enjoying an all-expenses-paid vacation to the Bahamas, courtesy of Mr. Carter. I walked through the automatic doors of St. Mary's hospital with my head down, pushing a cart full of linens. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure the security guard at the front desk could hear it. I knew the layout of the VIP wing. I had visited my grandfather there before he passed. I knew that the shift change happened exactly at 7 in the evening. That was the window. The doctors would be briefing the night staff. The nurses would be distracted by the handover. And Brad, arrogant as ever, would likely be gone for dinner because he hated the smell of hospitals. I took the service elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with expensive art and hushed voices. I counted the door numbers. 401, 402. There it was, Beatrice Vance. 2 private security guards were standing outside the door. They were not hospital security. They were Brad's men. He had put them there not to protect her from the world but to protect his secrets from her. I gripped the handle of the linen cart. I needed a distraction. Suddenly down the hall a fire alarm began to chirp, then another, then the strobe started flashing. Mr. Carter's team was efficient. It wasn't a full alarm, just a localized system malfunction that would require the guards to investigate the panel at the end of the hall. As the 2 men walked away grumbling about the noise, I slipped into the room. The room was dim, lit only by the glowing monitors of the medical equipment. The smell of antiseptic and lilies hung heavy in the air. My grandmother lay in the bed looking smaller and frailer than I had ever seen her. Her silver hair was spread out on the pillow. Her eyes were closed. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. I locked the door behind me and dragged a heavy chair under the handle. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it would buy me 5 minutes. I walked to the bedside. "Grandma," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. Then they opened. At first there was confusion in her eyes. Then, as she focused on my face above the mask, recognition dawned. And then terror. She gasped her hand, fumbling for the red call button on the side of the bed. She tried to scream, but her voice was weak, raspy from days of silence. "You," she wheezed. "Get away. You thief. Help. Someone help." I grabbed her hand. I didn't pull it away. I held it tight. "Grandma, stop," I said, my voice urgent. "Please, for the love of God, do not press that button. If you press it, Brad wins." She glared at me, tears of anger welling in her eyes. She pulled her hand away and reached for the button again. "You stole my money," she hissed. "You stole from the family." "Brad told me. He told me everything." "He lied," I said, pulling the mask down so she could see my face. "I didn't come here to hurt you. I came here to show you the truth." I reached into the pocket of my scrubs and pulled out the folded papers. The shadow ledger. The bank statements. The crypto losses. I unfolded them and held them under the reading light. "Look at this," I commanded. "Do not look at me. Look at the numbers. You taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 10 years old. Read it." Beatrice Vance was a businesswoman before she was a grandmother. Her eyes instinctively went to the columns. She squinted, her brow furrowing. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It is the pension fund," I said. "The fund for the factory workers. The fund for your driver. The fund for the housekeeper who has been with us for 20 years. Look at the balance." She traced the line with a shaking finger. "Zero." She looked up at me. "This is a mistake." "It is not a mistake," I said, flipping the page. "Here is the transfer history. $25 million moved to a crypto exchange 3 months ago. And here is the loss report. He bet it all on a coin that crashed. It is gone, Grandma. All of it." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Brad is a good man. He is a financial genius. He bought me the house in Martha's Vineyard." I flipped to the next page, the foreclosure notice from Ironclad Capital. "He didn't buy it," I said softly. "He mortgaged it. And he hasn't paid the mortgage in 4 months. The bank is taking the house next week. And look at this." I showed her the last document, the one that hurt the most. It was the power of attorney with my forged signature. "He used my name," I said, tears stinging my own eyes. "He set me up to take the fall. He made you hate me so that when the police came you would testify against me. He made me homeless. He destroyed my career. And now he is waiting for you to die so he can bury the evidence before the quarterly audit. Grandma Beatrice stared at the papers. Her hands started to shake violently. The heart monitor began to beep faster. Beep, beep, beep. She closed her eyes and a single tear rolled down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of pure, devastating realization. She had let a wolf into the henhouse. She had fed him. She had clothed him. And he had eaten her children. That bastard, she whispered. The venom in her voice was so strong it almost cracked the air. She tried to sit up. Her face turned red. Get me the phone. I am going to call the police. I am going to ruin him. I want him out of my company. I want him in jail. I put my hands on her shoulders and gently pushed her back down. No, I said firmly. You cannot call the police. Not yet. Why, she demanded, her old fire returning. He is a criminal, because he controls everything I said. He has your medical power of attorney. He has the board of directors in his pocket. If you call the police now, he will claim you are senile. He will claim these papers are fake, just like he claimed the deed was fake. He will use his lawyers to drag this out for years, and by the time it is over, the money will be gone forever. Then what do we do? She asked, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. We cannot let him win, Sophia. We are going to trap him, I said. I have a plan. But you have to trust me, and you have to be the best actress in the world. Tell me, she said. The Christmas party is in 2 days, I explained. He is planning to announce the merger with Carter Industries. He thinks he has won. He thinks you are dying in this bed. I leaned closer to her ear. I want you to stay in this bed, I whispered. I want you to close your eyes. When the doctors come in, you don't speak. When Brad comes in, you don't move. You are confused. You are weak. You are fading away. She looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. He needs you to sign over the voting rights before the party, I continued. He will come here with a contract. He will try to get you to sign it while you are medicated. I want you to sign it, I said. What? She gasped. Sign it, I repeated. But sign it with your left hand. Make it look shaky. Make him think he has won. Make him feel safe. Because when a man feels safe, he gets careless. He will invite everyone to that party to witness his triumph. He will invite the press. He will invite the investors. And that is when we strike, I said. I will be there. And I won't be alone. I am bringing the FBI. But we need him to confess. We need him to say it out loud. Grandma Beatrice took a deep breath. She looked at the papers one last time, then looked at me. I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Respect. You are not the little girl who liked to read books anymore, are you? She said softly. No, I said. I am the woman you raised me to be. Suddenly the handle of the door jiggled, then a heavy pounding. Open the door, a voice shouted. It was the guard. The fire alarm had stopped. I looked at Grandma. Are you ready? I asked. She nodded. She laid back on the pillow. She let her mouth go slack. She closed her eyes. In an instant, the sharp businesswoman vanished, replaced by a frail, dying old lady. Go, she whispered without moving her lips. Go get him, Sophia. I pulled the chair away from the door and ran to the bathroom. I climbed out of the small window onto the fire escape just as the guards burst into the room. Hey, one of them shouted. The window is open. I didn't look back. I climbed down the metal ladder into the freezing night air. My heart was soaring. I had gone in to save my grandmother, but she had saved me too. She believed me. I ran to the waiting car where Mr. Carter's driver was waiting. Did you see her? The driver asked. I nodded, pulling off the surgical mask. Is she okay? He asked. I looked up at the window of room 402. She is better than okay, I said, a smile spreading across my face. She is awake, and she is waiting. Brad Miller thought he was playing chess with a pawn. He didn't realize the queen had just returned to the board. And in 48 hours, Checkmate was going to be televised. The morning after I escaped from the hospital, the news broke across every major network in Atlanta. I sat in the safe house Mr. Carter had provided, watching the television screen with a cup of black coffee in my hand. The camera flashed to a press conference being held on the steps of St. Mary's Hospital. There was my grandmother sitting in a wheelchair looking smaller and frailer than I had ever seen her. A heavy wool blanket was draped over her lap, and her hands trembled visibly as she adjusted the microphone. Standing behind her like a pair of vultures were Brad and Kesha. Brad placed a possessive hand on her shoulder, squeezing it just hard enough to look supportive, but I knew it was a reminder of his control. Beatrice cleared her throat and spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper. It was a masterclass in acting. She told the reporters that her health was failing. She told them that the recent scandals involving family members had broken her spirit. She paused to wipe a tear from her eye, and I watched Brad smirk slightly at the cameras. Then she delivered the line that sealed the trap. Because I can no longer carry the burden of leadership, I have decided to step down as CEO of Beatrice Vance Holdings effective immediately. I am transferring full executive control and 70% of the voting shares to my grandson-in-law, Brad Miller, and my granddaughter, Kesha. We will sign the official transfer documents this coming Christmas Eve at the annual family gala. The press went wild. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning. Brad stepped forward, taking the microphone with the confidence of a man who had just conquered a kingdom. He spoke about legacy and responsibility. He spoke about modernizing the company. He spoke about family values, while the woman he was slowly killing sat silently beside him. I turned off the TV. It was perfect. He had taken the bait. For the next 24 hours, Brad went on a spending spree that would make a lottery winner blush. He didn't wait for the ink to dry. He started booking contractors to renovate the corporate headquarters. He fired the CFO who had asked questions about the pension fund. And most importantly, he sent out the invitations for the Christmas Eve gala. I received mine by special courier. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a summons. I opened the heavy cream envelope. Inside was a gold-embossed card inviting me to the Vance estate for a celebration of new beginnings. But clipped to the back of the invitation was a legal document drafted by Brad's lawyers. It was a quitclaim deed and a waiver of inheritance. The terms were brutal. By attending the party and signing this document, I would publicly acknowledge that I had no claim to the company or the estate. I would admit to misappropriating funds, and I would agree to a permanent silence order in exchange for the family not pressing criminal charges against me. It was a public execution disguised as a party. Brad didn't just want my money. He wanted my dignity. He wanted the elite of Atlanta to watch me bend the knee. He wanted to parade me in front of his wealthy white investors as the disgraced black sheep while he played the benevolent savior who was sparing me from prison. I called Stanton the shark lawyer Mr. Carter had given me. "Did you get the document?" I asked. "I did." Stanton replied, his voice raspy and amused. "It is a piece of work. He is really hanging himself with this one, Sophia. If you sign this under duress in front of 300 witnesses, it effectively proves coercion, especially when we drop the evidence of the fraud." "Is everything else ready?" I asked. "The FBI is briefed," Stanton said. "They will be in unmarked vans at the perimeter. They want to wait until he signs the transfer documents. That is the moment the crime becomes federal wire fraud and conspiracy. But Sophia, you have to be careful. Once you step onto that property, you are in the lion's den. Brad has hired private security. If they figure out what you are doing before the FBI moves in, it could get ugly." "I am not afraid of Brad," I said. I hung up the phone. I wasn't afraid. I was focused. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the performance of my life. I went to the closet and pulled out the dress I had bought with Mr. Carter's credit card. It was a floor-length gown in emerald green silk. It was elegant but sharp. It wasn't the dress of a woman coming to beg for forgiveness. It was the dress of a woman coming to take over. I did my makeup in the mirror. I covered the dark circles under my eyes. I contoured my face to look fierce. I applied a dark red lipstick that looked like war paint. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kesha. "Don't be late tonight," it read. "And wear something appropriate. Brad says if you make a scene, he will have you arrested at the gate. Just sign the papers, eat some shrimp, and leave. This is our night. Don't ruin it. I didn't reply. I just stared at her name on the screen. She was so confident. She thought she had won the lottery. She didn't realize she had purchased a ticket on the Titanic. At 6 o'clock, the black SUV arrived to pick me up. My 2 bodyguards got in the front seat. They checked their earpieces. "We are ready, Ms. Vance," one of them said. "We have eyes on the interior. The ballroom is set up with a stage. There is a projector screen for Brad's presentation." "Good," I said. "That projector is going to be very useful." We drove through the winding streets of Buckhead toward the estate. As we got closer, I could see the lights of the mansion illuminating the night sky. There were valets running back and forth parking Bentleys and Ferraris. The driveway was lined with photographers. Brad had turned a family Christmas party into a coronation. I watched the guests arriving. I saw the bankers who had denied me loans. I saw the socialites who had laughed at my clothes. I saw the neighbors who had called the police on me when I was a teenager walking in my own neighborhood. They were all there to celebrate Brad Miller. They were there to celebrate the erasure of the Vance legacy and its replacement with something more palatable to them. The car stopped at the security checkpoint. A guard with a clipboard looked in the window. He sneered when he saw me. "Name?" he asked, pretending not to know who I was. "Sophia Vance," I said. He scanned the list slowly. "Brad told me to make sure you check your bag," he said. "No recording devices, no weapons." I handed him my small clutch purse. He dug through it roughly. He found my lipstick, my ID, and a single USB drive. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the drive. "It is a digital copy of the waiver I need to sign," I lied smoothly. "My lawyer made some formatting changes. Brad needs to print this version if he wants my signature." The guard looked at the drive, then at me. He shrugged and tossed it back into the purse. He didn't know he had just handed me the match that would burn the house down. "You can go in," he said, "but behave yourself." The gate opened. We drove up the long driveway. The house looked magnificent. Wreaths hung from every window. Thousands of white lights draped the columns. It looked like a fairy tale, but inside I knew it was a house of cards. I stepped out of the car. The flashbulbs popped blindingly. Reporters shouted my name. "Sophia, is it true you stole the pension fund? Sophia, are you going to apologize to your grandmother tonight? Sophia, how does it feel to be the disgrace of the family?" I didn't answer. I didn't look down. I walked up the marble stairs with my head held high. I could hear the music drifting from inside. It was a jazz band playing Christmas carols. I reached the massive front doors. The butler opened them. The warmth of the house hit me, carrying the scent of pine and expensive perfume. I stood in the entryway looking into the grand ballroom. It was packed. Hundreds of people were drinking champagne and laughing. And there in the center of the room, on a raised platform, sat my grandmother in her wheelchair, looking like a prisoner on display. Next to her stood Brad, holding a glass of scotch, laughing with a group of investors. He saw me. The room went quiet as heads turned. Brad raised his glass and smiled. A shark smiling at a seal. "Ah, Sophia," he called out, his voice booming over the crowd. "You made it. We were just talking about you. Come in. Come join the family. We have some business to settle." I took a deep breath. I gripped my clutch purse tight. I started walking across the floor. The crowd parted for me, whispering as I passed. They thought they were watching a lamb walking to the slaughter. They were wrong. They were watching the wolf walking in to eat. I walked straight toward the stage, straight toward the man who stole my life, and I smiled back. "I am here, Brad," I said, my voice clear and ringing in the silent hall. "Let's finish this." The grand ballroom of the Vance estate was warmer than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the heat of 300 bodies packed together in anticipation. The air smelled of expensive perfume, prime rib, and the crisp scent of pine from the massive Christmas trees that lined the walls. But underneath it all was the stench of betrayal. I stood at the base of the stage, my emerald dress shimmering under the stage lights, looking up at the man who had stolen my life. Brad Miller stood behind the podium, gripping the sides with his manicured hands. He looked every inch the conqueror. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first year of college tuition. His hair was perfectly coiffed. His smile was dazzling, practicing the kind of false humility that wealthy people use to mask their greed. Behind him, a massive projector screen displayed a slide with the words, "A New Era" for Vance Holdings. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brad said, his voice smooth and commanding, echoing through the high-quality sound system. "Tonight is not just about celebration, it is about legacy. For 40 years, Beatrice Vance built this company from a single beauty shop into an empire. She broke barriers. She defied expectations. And now, as her health declines, she has entrusted me with the solemn duty of carrying that torch into the future." He paused for effect, looking down at my grandmother, who sat in her wheelchair to his right. She was slumped over slightly, a blanket covering her legs, her eyes vacant. She was playing her part perfectly. To the room, she looked like a woman who had given up. To me, she looked like a coiled spring waiting to snap. "We are entering a time of unprecedented prosperity," Brad continued, gesturing to the charts on the screen behind him. "With our upcoming merger and the restructuring of our assets, we are poised to double our valuation by the end of the fiscal quarter. But to move forward, we must sometimes make difficult decisions. We must prune the branches that are no longer bearing fruit to save the tree." The crowd murmured in agreement. I felt their eyes boring into my back. They knew who the dead branch was. They knew I was the sacrifice on the altar of Brad's ambition. And so Brad said, his eyes locking onto mine, his smile widening into something predatory, "I would like to invite my sister-in-law, Sophia Vance, to the stage. Tonight, in front of our family and our esteemed partners, Sophia is taking a brave step. She is formally stepping away from the company to focus on her recovery. She is signing over her shares to ensure the stability of the business she loves. Please give her a round of applause." The applause was polite but thin. It was the sound of people witnessing a public execution and trying to be mannerly about it. I walked up the stairs. My heels clicked rhythmically on the wood. Click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. Kesha was waiting for me at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a red dress that was too bright and too tight. She held a silver tray with a document and a heavy fountain pen. As I reached her, she leaned in close to hug me. It looked like a gesture of sisterly love to the audience, but her whisper was cold enough to freeze water. "Sign it quickly," she hissed in my ear. "Don't make a speech. Don't cry. Just sign the damn paper and go out the back door. The kitchen staff has a plate of leftovers for you." I pulled back and looked at her. Her eyes were hard and shiny like glass marbles. She really believed she was the winner. She really believed that this man loved her and that this life belonged to her. For a second, I felt a pang of pity. Then I remembered the phone call. I remembered her laughing about selling me out for a handbag. The pity evaporated. I walked past her to the podium. Brad stepped aside, offering me the center stage. He gestured to the document Kesha had placed on the lectern. "The floor is yours, Sophia," he said softly so only I could hear. "Be a good girl and sign." I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the bankers. I saw the investors. I saw the people who had judged me based on Brad's lies. They were waiting for my surrender. They were waiting for the broken, drug-addicted black sheep to admit defeat. I reached out and picked up the pen. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Brad relaxed his shoulders. Kesha smirked. Then I set the pen down. I didn't sign. Instead, I reached into my clutch purse. Brad's eyes narrowed. He took a half step forward, thinking I was reaching for a weapon or a microphone to make a scene, but I pulled out a small silver USB drive. Before anyone could react, I turned to the laptop that was running the presentation. It was sitting on a small stand next to the podium. I pulled out the HDMI cable that connected Brad's laptop to the projector and plugged it into the side of the venue's backup system, inserting my drive. "Sophia, what are you doing?" "Brad," hissed his voice, losing its smooth composure. "Security, get her off the stage." But it was too late. The massive screen behind us flickered. The image of the rising profits chart vanished. In its place, a high-definition video appeared. The audio boomed through the speakers loud and crystal clear. It was a video of a sun-drenched patio overlooking the ocean. The crowd gasped as they recognized the location. It was the Martha's Vineyard house. But it wasn't the scenery that caught their attention. It was the people. On the screen, Brad's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Harper, were sitting at a patio table. They were drinking a bottle of wine that I recognized from my grandmother's private cellar. Brad was there too, sitting opposite them, his feet propped up on the railing. The date stamp in the corner of the video showed it was recorded 3 days ago. The Brad on the screen was laughing. It wasn't his polite corporate laugh. It was a deep belly laugh of pure mockery. "I tell you, son," Mr. Harper said on the screen, raising his glass. "You really outdid yourself this time. I thought these people would be harder to crack." Brad on the screen took a sip of his drink and smirked. "Dad, you give them too much credit. They are terrified of losing their little empire. Beatrice is old and weak. And Kesha." Brad paused to chuckle. "Kesha is useful. She likes shiny things. I bought her a car and she signed whatever I put in front of her. She doesn't even read the documents." The real Kesha, standing a few feet away from me on the stage, let out a strangled gasp. She took a step back, her hand covering her mouth. But the video wasn't done. Mrs. Harper leaned into the frame. "Well, I am just glad we finally got the deed sorted," she said. "I hated living in Florida. This house is much more suitable for us." "But Brad, honey, are you sure the sister won't be a problem? That Sophia girl seems sharp." Brad on the screen waved his hand dismissively. "Sophia is a nobody, Mom. She is a forensic accountant, sure, but she is still a black woman in the South. I have the board eating out of my hand. I told them she was on drugs, and they didn't even ask for proof. They just nodded." Then came the line that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Mr. Harper laughed, shaking his head. "It is amazing, isn't it? You can take everything they built over 40 years, and they thank you for it, because you put on a suit and speak their language. These stupid black people think they made it to the top, but they are just holding the seat warm for us." The slur hung in the air, magnified by the $1 million sound system. Stupid. Black. People. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. 300 people, the elite of Atlanta, many of them African-American business leaders, stood frozen in shock. I watched the color drain from Brad's face. It didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once. He turned a sickly ash-gray color. He looked at the screen, then at the audience, then at me. His eyes were wide with terrified realization. The mask had not just slipped. It had been ripped off and burned. On the screen, the video continued. Brad was raising a toast. "To the Vance fortune," he said. Or should I say, the Miller fortune. "By Christmas, the old hag will be out of the picture and we will own it all." I reached over and pulled the USB drive out. The screen went black. I turned to the microphone. The silence was still unbroken. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the waiters had stopped with their trays suspended in midair. I looked at Brad. He was trembling. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked at the investors in the front row. They were looking back at him with expressions of pure, unadulterated loathing. He looked at Kesha. She was staring at him, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking as the reality of his betrayal crashed down on her. I didn't need to sign anything I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, steady, and dangerous. I think I said, looking Brad dead in the eye, "That concludes your presentation on legacy." Brad lunged for me. It was a desperate, animalistic move. He reached for the microphone, perhaps to claim it was a deep fake, perhaps to hit me. "You bitch," he screamed. "You ruined everything." But before he could touch me, the double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. "Federal agents," a voice boomed. "Nobody move." Dozens of agents in FBI windbreakers swarmed the room. They didn't go for the guests. They moved in a synchronized wave toward the stage. I stepped back, smoothing my dress. I watched as Brad Miller, the man who thought he was untouchable, realized that his complexion protection had just expired. The party was over. The real audit had just begun. The video of Brad's parents mocking our race faded to black, but the silence in the ballroom remained heavy and suffocating. Brad stood frozen at the podium, his face a mask of sheer terror. He looked like a man who had been stripped naked in front of an army. But I was not done. The racism was just the appetizer. The main course was the math. I pressed the button on the small remote control in my hand. The massive screen behind me flickered again. This time it did not show a video. It showed a spreadsheet. It was not a boring corporate document. It was a forensic map of theft. I had highlighted the stolen funds in bright crimson red so that even the people in the back of the room could see the blood money. Brad. I said, my voice echoing clearly through the speakers. You told the board of directors that the $25 million gap in the pension fund was due to a failed investment in a high-tech startup in Silicon Valley. You said it was a market risk. You said it was bad luck. I took a step closer to him. He flinched. I pressed the button again. A new slide appeared. It showed a series of wire transfers. The dates matched the withdrawals from the pension fund exactly. But Silicon Valley is not in Macau, I said. The crowd murmured. I pointed to the screen. These are direct transfers from the Beatrice Vance pension fund to the Galaxy Casino and Resort in Macau. I explained, keeping my eyes locked on Brad. You didn't invest the money, Brad. You gambled it. You played baccarat at $50,000 a hand, and you lost. You lost the retirement money of the janitor who cleaned your office. You lost the savings of the secretary who sends your mother flowers on her birthday. You are not a venture capitalist. You are a degenerate gambler with a platinum credit card that doesn't belong to you. No? Brad stammered, his sweat dripping onto his pristine tuxedo. That is a lie. Those are fabricated. I didn't argue. I just clicked the remote. Slide number 3. This one was personal. This one was for my sister. You also told my sister Kesha that the money was tight this year because of the merger, I said. You told her she couldn't buy that vacation home in Aspen because we needed to be liquid. You told her you were making sacrifices for the family. I looked down at Kesha, who was standing at the foot of the stage. She was trembling, clutching the edge of the stage, her mascara running down her cheeks. Kesha, look at the screen, I said softly. The slide showed credit card statements. But these weren't for casinos. They were for luxury boutiques. Cartier, Chanel, Tiffany, and a lease agreement for a penthouse apartment in Miami South Beach. Who is Elena Rodriguez, Brad? I asked. Brad's eyes bulged. He lunged for the laptop, trying to rip the cords out, but I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Elena Rodriguez is the woman living in the Miami penthouse you paid for with company funds, I continued. And look at this transaction date. December 14th. That was 3 days ago. You bought a diamond choker necklace worth $150,000. I looked at Kesha's neck. She was wearing a simple gold chain. Kesha, I asked, did you get a diamond choker for Christmas? Kesha made a sound that was half sob and half scream. She looked at Brad. Her eyes were wide with a realization that was far more painful than the financial ruin. He hadn't just stolen from her grandmother. He hadn't just mocked her race. He had replaced her. You told me you were in meetings, Kesha whispered, her voice shaking. You told me you were working late to save the company. Brad held up his hands, backing away. Kesha, baby, listen to me. She is crazy. Sophia fabricated this. Elena is just a consultant. She is an interior designer for the new office. A consultant, I interrupted, clicking to the next slide. It was a photo from a social media account. It showed Brad and a beautiful brunette woman on a yacht. The caption read, "My love buying me the world." The date was Kesha's birthday. That was the match that lit the powder keg. Kesha didn't scream. She roared. It was a primal sound of pure feminine rage. She scrambled up the stairs of the stage in her tight red dress, moving faster than I had ever seen her move. "You lying snake," she shrieked. She threw herself at him. Her manicured nails, the ones he had paid for, became claws. She went for his face. Brad stumbled back, tripping over the microphone stand. They fell to the floor in a tangle of limbs and satin. The podium crashed over with a deafening boom. Kesha was hitting him, scratching him, tearing at his expensive tuxedo. "You cheated on me," she screamed over and over. "You stole my money and gave it to her," security Brad yelled, trying to shield his face. "Get this crazy bitch off me." The private security guards Brad had hired rushed the stage, but before they could lay a hand on my sister, the double doors at the main entrance exploded inward. This time, it wasn't the butler. "Federal agents," a voice boomed like thunder. "Everyone stay where you are." A dozen men and women in blue windbreakers with yellow FBI lettering stormed into the ballroom. They moved with military precision. Behind them came agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, their badges flashing under the chandeliers. The guests screamed and scattered, dropping champagne glasses that shattered on the marble floor. But the agents ignored them. They had a target. Two agents rushed the stage. They pulled Kesha off of Brad. She was sobbing hysterically, her hands shaking, her red dress torn. One agent gently guided her to the side. Two other agents grabbed Brad. He tried to scramble backward, crawling like a crab on the polished wood floor. "Do not touch me!" Brad shouted, his voice cracking. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of this company. This is a mistake. My lawyer will have your badges." "Mr. Bradley Miller," the lead agent said, hauling him to his feet and spinning him around. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit identity theft." I stood calmly by the fallen podium, holding my clutch purse. I watched as they slapped the handcuffs on him. The metal clicked shut. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Brad looked up. His hair was messed up. His face was bleeding where Kesha had scratched him. He looked at me. His eyes were full of hate, but also fear. For the first time in his life, he was looking at consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. "Sophia," he spat. "You did this. You ruined the family." I walked over to him. I leaned in close so only he could hear me over the chaos of the room. "I didn't ruin the family, Brad," I whispered. "I audited it, and you didn't pass." The agents dragged him away. He was kicking and screaming, demanding to call his father. I watched him go. I watched the man who had called me a junkie, who had made me homeless, who had tried to kill my grandmother, being dragged out like the common criminal he was. I looked over at Kesha. She was sitting on a chair the agents had provided, her face buried in her hands. She had lost everything tonight. Her husband, her money, her illusion of a perfect life. But she was free. She just didn't know it yet. Then I looked down at the front row. My grandmother, Beatrice Vance, was sitting in her wheelchair. The blanket had fallen off her lap. She was sitting up straight. Her eyes were clear and sharp. She looked at the empty stage where Brad had stood. Then she looked at me. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She just gave me a single slow nod. It was a salute from one general to another. The room was still full of panicked guests and shouting agents, but for a moment it felt like just the two of us. I had saved her legacy. I had cleaned the house. An IRS agent approached me. "Vance," he said respectfully. "We have the warrant for the computers in the back office. We will need your statement regarding the documents you provided." I handed him the USB drive. "Everything is there," I said. "Every transaction, every forgery, every lie." I looked around the glittering ballroom one last time. The party was over. The decorations looked garish now under the harsh lights of the police investigation. But as I walked down the stairs of the stage, my heels clicking on the floor, I didn't feel like a guest at a ruined party. I felt like the owner inspecting a demolition site, ready to build something new on the ashes. The ballroom in Atlanta was being cleared as evidence, but hundreds of miles away in the pitch-black darkness of Martha's Vineyard, the final act of my revenge was just beginning. It was 2 a.m. The ocean was crashing against the cliffs below the estate at 12 Ocean View Drive. Inside the house, Mr. and Mrs. Harper were sleeping soundly in the master suite wrapped in 400 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets that my grandmother had paid for. They were dreaming of their comfortable retirement. They were dreaming of the yacht club lunches and the respect they felt they deserved. They had no idea that the nightmare was parked at the bottom of their driveway. I sat in a private room at the back of the hotel ballroom holding my phone. On the screen was a live video call. It was Agent Stanton, the federal liaison Mr. Carter had arranged for me. He was sitting in an unmarked van just outside the gates of the Vineyard estate. "Are we clear to move?" Stanton asked, his voice tiny through my phone speaker. I looked at the clock on the wall. Brad was already being processed at the Central Precinct in Atlanta. The wire transfers had been frozen. The confession video was trending on Twitter. "Execute the warrant," I said. "Take my house back." Stanton signaled to the team outside. On the screen, I watched as 3 black SUVs rolled silently up the gravel driveway. They did not use sirens. There were no flashing lights to warn the neighbors. This was a federal raid, and the element of surprise was their greatest weapon. The Edgartown police were there too, but this time they were not there to protect the Harpers. They were there to assist the FBI. I wondered if it was the same officer who had threatened to arrest me just days ago. I hoped it was. I wanted him to see exactly who the real criminal was. The convoy stopped at the front door. I watched through the shaky camera feed as 6 agents in tactical gear stepped out. They moved with a terrifying efficiency. They didn't ring the doorbell. They didn't wait for permission. One of the agents raised a heavy battering ram. Boom! The sound of the solid oak door splintering echoed even through my phone. Boom! The lock gave way. The door swung open, crashing against the interior wall. "Federal agents!" a voice roared, shattering the silence of the night. "Search warrant! Clear the rooms!" I could hear the chaos erupt instantly. The heavy boots of the agents thudded on the hardwood floors, the same floors Mrs. Harper had accused me of dirtying with my cheap shoes. Upstairs, lights flickered on. I heard Mrs. Harper scream. It was a high, piercing sound of pure terror. Down on the ground, an agent shouted, "Show me your hands!" The camera feed moved as Agent Stanton followed the team inside. They stormed up the grand staircase. I watched as they kicked open the door to the master bedroom. Mr. Harper was sitting up in bed, blinking blindly in the harsh beams of the tactical flashlights. He was wearing silk pajamas, his face pale and puffy with sleep. Mrs. Harper was clutching the duvet to her chest, screaming hysterically. "What is the meaning of this?" Mr. Harper bellowed, trying to summon the authority he thought he possessed. "Do you know who I am? Get out of my house. Get out of bed now," an agent commanded, aiming his weapon at the floor. Mrs. Harper began to cry. "Robert, do something! They are pointing guns at us." Mr. Harper scrambled out of bed, his hands shaking. "You are making a mistake. My son owns this house. Call the chief of police. I play golf with him. Tell him Robert Harper is being harassed." The agent didn't lower his voice. "Turn around and place your hands behind your head." Mr. Harper's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He wasn't used to being given orders. He was used to giving them. "We are respectable citizens," he shouted, his voice cracking. "We are white. You cannot treat us like criminals. Go raid the inner city. We belong here." I watched from my phone screen thousands of miles away and felt a cold smile spread across my face. There it was, the entitlement. The belief that their skin color was a shield that could deflect federal law. The agent holstered his weapon and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click as he snapped them onto Mr. Harper's wrists was loud and final. "Sir, this is a federal warrant issued by the Southern District of Georgia," the agent said calmly. "Skin color does not grant immunity from conspiracy to commit wire fraud and possession of stolen assets. You are under arrest." Mrs. Harper lunged at the agent, trying to pull him away from her husband. "You leave him alone!" she shrieked. "You are hurting him!" Another agent grabbed her. "Ma'am, you are also under arrest for being an accomplice to money laundering and for trespassing on seized property." Trespassing, she screamed as the cuffs were slapped onto her wrists. We have a lease. We have a lease for life. Your lease is a forgery, ma'am, the agent said, pulling her toward the door. And your son is currently in a holding cell in Atlanta. He gave you up about 20 minutes ago to try and get a plea deal. That shut her up. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Mrs. Harper looked at her husband. Mr. Harper looked at the floor. The reality of their situation crashed down on them like a tidal wave. Their son, their golden boy, the one who had promised them the world, had sold them out the moment the handcuffs touched his skin. I watched as they were led out of the bedroom. They looked small. They looked old. Without their arrogance and their stolen wealth, they were just two pathetic people in pajamas being dragged out of a house that never belonged to them. Agent Stanton walked them down the stairs. As they reached the foyer, Mrs. Harper looked at the camera Stanton was holding. She must have realized someone was watching. "Who is that?" she demanded. "Who are you filming for?" Stanton turned the phone screen around so they could see me. I was sitting in the ballroom, still wearing my emerald green dress, holding a glass of vintage red wine that I had taken from the celebration table. "Hello, Mrs. Harper," I said softly. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes bulged. "You," she hissed. "You did this, you ungrateful little—" I took a slow sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. "I told you I was the owner," I said, my voice calm and steady. "And I believe I told you to get off my property." She tried to lunge at the phone, but the agents held her back. "You will pay for this," Mr. Harper shouted as they dragged him out the door. "We will sue you. We will take everything." "You have nothing left to take, Robert," I said. "The bank accounts are frozen. The pension fund is being recovered, and Ironclad Capital has already started the foreclosure paperwork on your own house in Florida to pay back your son's debts. You are homeless, just like you wanted me to be." The agents pushed them out into the cold night air. I watched as they were loaded into the back of the police SUVs. The same SUVs that had followed me out of town just days ago were now taking them to a federal detention center. Stanton turned the camera back to the house. The front door was hanging off its hinges. The beautiful foyer was filled with muddy boot prints. But to me, it looked perfect. It looked clean. "We will secure the perimeter," Ms. Vance Stanton said. "The locks will be changed by morning." "Thank you, Agent," I said. "Make sure you throw away the wine they opened. I don't want anything they touched left in my house." I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long moment in the silence of the empty room. I looked at the glass of wine in my hand. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. The knot of fear that had been in my stomach for weeks was gone. I thought about the night I slept in my car in the freezing cold. I thought about the look on my grandmother's face when she thought I had betrayed her. I thought about the way the Harpers had looked at me through the gate like I was dirt. They had tried to bury me. They had tried to erase me. But they forgot that you cannot bury a seed and expect it not to grow. I had grown. I had grown thorns. And I had grown strong. I finished the wine and set the glass down. I stood up and smoothed my dress. I had a grandmother to visit. I had a company to rebuild. And I had a life to live. The war was over. And for the first time in a long time, the ledger was balanced. The trial of Brad Miller lasted 3 weeks, but the jury only needed 4 hours to decide his fate. I sat in the front row of the federal courthouse, wearing the same emerald green suit I had worn the night I exposed him. I watched the back of his head as the foreman stood up. Brad was trembling. The arrogance that had defined him for years had evaporated, leaving behind a small, frightened man in a cheap suit provided by his public defender. Guilty on all counts. The judge did not show mercy. He called Brad a predator who preyed on the elderly and the trusting. He sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As the marshals led him away, Brad turned to look at me one last time. He didn't scream or curse. He just looked confused, as if he still couldn't understand how the girl sleeping in her car had managed to topple his empire. Kesha did not go to prison. Because she cooperated with the prosecution and testified against her husband, She received 5 years of probation. But in many ways, her punishment was worse than a cell. The government seized everything. The Porsche was towed away. The designer clothes were auctioned off to pay back the victims. The penthouse in Miami was foreclosed. I saw her last week. I stopped by a discount grocery store in downtown Atlanta to pick up some fruit. I was standing in the checkout line when I saw the cashier. She was wearing a faded blue smock with a plastic name tag that looked crooked. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun and she looked 10 years older than she was. It was Kesha. She scanned my apples without looking up. When she finally raised her eyes and saw me, she froze. Her hand hovered over the scanner. I saw the shame flood her face. I saw the memory of the hurtful things she had said to me on the phone, the way she had mocked my poverty and called me a failure. I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't gloat. I simply paid for my groceries and waited for the receipt. "Here is your receipt," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. "Thank you, Kesha," I said softly. I walked away, leaving her to scan the next customer's frozen dinners. She had chosen the golden handcuffs of a narcissist over the loyalty of her sister, and now she was left with nothing but the consequences of that choice. As for the company, the damage Brad had done was catastrophic. Beatrice Vance Holdings was bleeding money. The reputation was in tatters, and the creditors were circling like vultures. My grandmother wanted me to take over. She begged me to step in as CEO and try to salvage the legacy. We were sitting in the sunroom of her Atlanta estate. She was out of the wheelchair now, but she walked with a cane. "You can save it, Sophia," she said. "You have the mind for it. You are the only one who can fix this." I took her hand. It was frail and spotted with age. "No, Grandma," I said firmly. "I can't save it, and I don't want to. This company was your life's work, but it almost cost you your life. It is time to let it go." I spent the next 3 months overseeing the liquidation. I sold the assets piece by piece. I sold the office buildings. I sold the brand rights. I used every penny to pay back the pension fund Brad had stolen. I made sure every janitor, every secretary, and every driver got their retirement money back. When the dust settled, there was no company left, but there was no debt either. Grandma Beatrice moved into a lovely assisted living community where she played bridge and didn't have to worry about stock prices or board meetings. She was poorer than she had been in 40 years, but for the first time, she was at peace. There was only one asset I kept. I sat on the balcony of 12 Ocean View Drive in Martha's Vineyard. The winter had passed, and the spring air was crisp and salty. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below a rhythmic sound that I had come to love. This was my home now. I had legally reclaimed it. I had replaced every stick of furniture the Harpers had touched. I had painted the walls a soft, calming blue. It was no longer a symbol of Brad's fraud. It was my sanctuary. I didn't go back to corporate auditing. I realized that my skills were needed elsewhere. I opened a boutique consulting firm called Vance Financial Protection. My clients were exclusively women. I helped women who were going through divorces find the money their husbands were hiding. I helped grandmothers protect their estates from greedy relatives. I helped young heiresses understand their trust so they wouldn't be manipulated. I was busy. I was successful. And I was free. My phone buzzed on the patio table. It was a notification from my bank. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Incoming wire transfer. U.S. Treasury Department. The amount made me laugh out loud. $3 million. It was the Whistleblower Award. The IRS pays a percentage of the taxes recovered from tax cheats to the person who turned them in. By exposing Brad's massive money laundering operation and his offshore accounts, I had helped the government recover tens of millions in unpaid taxes and penalties. And this was my cut. I stared at the number, $3 million. It was more money than Brad had ever given me. It was more money than Kesha had ever seen. And I had earned it not by stealing, not by marrying rich, but by telling the truth. I picked up my glass of wine and walked to the railing. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I thought about that Thanksgiving dinner. I thought about the $50 bill Brad had thrown at me. I thought about the way they had looked at me like I was garbage. They had tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. And now, looking at my beautiful home and my bank account, I realized that they had done me a favor. They had pushed me off the cliff so I would be forced to learn how to fly. I raised my glass to the empty ocean and the ghost of the man sitting in a cell in federal prison. "Thank you for Thanksgiving dinner, Brad," I said, smiling as the wind caught my hair. I took a sip of wine and turned back to my laptop. I had a new client meeting in 10 minutes. A woman in Chicago suspected her husband was hiding assets in cryptocurrency. I cracked my knuckles and started typing. The auditor was open for business. "My journey taught me that your greatest weapon is not your inheritance, but your competence. When my family tried to erase me, I didn't beg for their validation. I audited their lies. I learned that betrayal is often a clearing for a better foundation. We often fear being stripped of our titles and comfort, but hitting rock bottom provides the solid ground needed to build something authentic. True power comes when you stop fearing the collapse and start trusting your ability to rebuild." They tried to bury me, but they forgot I was a seed waiting to bloom. If this story of justice resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel to hear more authentic stories of resilience, growth, and the power of standing in your truth.